"It hurts too much," she whispered, and the cowboy replied, "Then I won't leave." The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the small diner, falling softly on the worn wooden tables and the shining counter. The smell of fresh coffee and warm bread filled the air. Ella had been working at the diner for years, and though she liked the routine, there was a quiet sadness that always lingered in her eyes. Life in the little town was simple, predictable, and sometimes painfully lonely. People came and went, sharing laughs, stories, and worries, but deep down, Ella carried a weight she could not easily share with anyone. Her life had not always been like this. There had been love, dreams, and laughter, but those days were behind her now. A heartbreak had left its mark, teaching her lessons about trust and pain. She had learned to protect herself, to hide her feelings, and to smile even when her heart ached. She poured coffee, served plates of pancakes, and nodded politely to the regular customers, all while keeping a careful distance from the world outside her small circle. That morning, the bell above the diner door jingled and Ella glanced up. A man had walked in. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a calm, confident presence. His hat was slightly worn, and his boots carried the dust of the road. Ella noticed the quiet way he carried himself, the way his eyes scanned the room as if he were taking in everything but revealing little. There was something about him that made her pause. "Good morning," she said, forcing a friendly smile. The man returned the smile with a warmth that felt genuine, not forced. "Morning, coffee, please." "Black," he said, his voice calm and steady, like a gentle breeze through the town. Ella poured the coffee, careful not to spill, but as she reached across the counter to hand it to him, her hand brushed against the cup. It wobbled for a moment and then she caught it just in time. She felt her cheeks heat up. "I'm so sorry," she said, embarrassed. The man chuckled softly, not in a mocking way, but with a kind, easygoing tone. "No harm done. Accidents happen," he said. There was a sincerity in his voice that made Ella relax a little, though her heart still beat faster than usual. As he took a sip of his coffee, he glanced around the diner, noticing the photos on the wall, the faded paint on the booths, and the small stack of newspapers in the corner. Ella watched him quietly, curious about this stranger who seemed out of place, yet completely at ease. "Just passing through?" she asked, trying to make conversation. He nodded. "Something like that. I'm Luke," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Ella," she replied, feeling an unexpected warmth in the sound of his name. There was a moment of silence, comfortable and easy, as if the world outside the diner had paused for a brief instant. Luke's presence was calm but noticeable. He seemed like someone who had seen life's hardships but still carried a quiet strength, a sense of honesty that was rare. Ella felt an unusual pull, a curiosity she could not easily explain. Days went by, and Luke kept returning to the diner. Each time he found a quiet corner, ordered his coffee, and watched the world go by. Ella noticed him more and more, and slowly she began to feel a connection she had not experienced in a long time. He never forced conversation, never asked too much too soon. Instead, he smiled when she smiled, nodded when she spoke, and carried a presence that was comforting rather than demanding. One afternoon, the diner was unusually busy. Plates clattered, customers talked loudly, and the aroma of fresh pies filled the air. Ella was hurrying from table to table, balancing trays and taking orders. In the rush, she bumped into Luke's table, and a small plate slid toward the edge. Luke caught it just in time, steadying it with one hand while giving her a reassuring look with the other. "You're working hard," he said softly. Ella laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's always like this on weekends," she said. Luke nodded, his eyes gentle. "I can see that. You manage it well, though." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made Ella's chest tighten. It was the kind of attention she hadn't realized she needed. There was no pressure, no judgment, just a quiet recognition of her efforts. She felt seen in a way that was unfamiliar but deeply comforting. Over the next few weeks, their interactions grew, small moments that added up to something more meaningful. Luke would share stories of the open plains, the animals he cared for, and the simple joys of life on a ranch. Ella would listen, intrigued by his perspective, and sometimes she would share her own thoughts, careful but genuine. She talked about the town, her routines, the little joys and struggles she experienced every day. Each conversation was a thread, weaving a connection that neither of them fully understood yet. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Luke stayed after the diner had closed. Ella wiped down the tables, her mind still lingering on the day's events. "You stay late," he said quietly, leaning against the doorway. "I like it when it's quiet," Ella replied. "Gives me time to think." Luke nodded, looking around the empty diner. "I like quiet too, makes it easier to notice the little things." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the last rays of sunlight filter through the windows. Ella felt an unfamiliar sense of calm. There was no need to hide, no need to pretend everything was fine. In Luke's presence, she could simply be herself. "I don't usually let people in," she said softly, almost to herself. Luke turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with a steady, understanding gaze. "That's okay. You don't have to," he said. Her heart skipped a beat. No one had ever understood that about her before. People had tried to get close, only to leave when things became complicated. But Luke's words were different. They carried patience, kindness, and an unspoken promise that he would stay, no matter what. From that day on, a quiet bond grew between them. It was slow, subtle, and full of small gestures. A shared laugh over spilled coffee, a quiet conversation after closing, a knowing look that said more than words ever could. Ella began to feel something she hadn't in a long time, a sense of hope, a possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry her pain alone. Luke didn't rush her. He didn't try to fix her life or push her to forget the past. Instead, he offered something far more valuable: presence. He showed her, through simple actions and gentle words, that she could trust him. And for Ella, who had learned to be wary of the world, that trust was a gift she was only beginning to understand. As the weeks turned into months, their connection deepened. The diner remained the center of their encounters, but life outside its walls began to feel brighter. Ella found herself looking forward to Luke's visits, not just for the conversations, but for the quiet reassurance of knowing someone cared, someone would listen, and someone would stay. One evening, as the stars began to appear in the night sky, Ella whispered to herself, barely audible, "It hurts too much." She wasn't sure if Luke had heard her, but somehow she felt he did. And even in her quiet vulnerability, she sensed a steady presence beside her, someone who wasn't going anywhere, someone who wouldn't leave. It was the beginning of a story neither of them could yet predict, a story built not on grand gestures or dramatic events, but on small, meaningful moments. Moments that showed patience, kindness, understanding, and the quiet power of simply being there for someone. Ella didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if the pain of the past would ever fully fade. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. A chance to heal, a chance to trust again, and a chance to let someone in without fear. And somewhere in the distance, Luke remained, steady and unwavering, a quiet promise that she would not have to face life alone. The diner's lights dimmed, and the night settled over the small town. Inside, Ella cleaned the last table, her heart a little lighter, her mind a little calmer. Outside, Luke leaned on his boots, watching the stars and the gentle glow of the diner's windows. Two lives, each carrying their own scars, had begun to touch in a way that promised something new, something real, something worth holding on to. And though neither of them could say what tomorrow would bring, they both felt the quiet certainty of a connection that had the power to change everything. Days turned into weeks, and Luke continued to visit the diner almost every morning. His presence had become a quiet part of Ella's routine, a small comfort she had not realized she was missing. She found herself looking forward to seeing him, wondering what story he might share today, or what small gesture might remind her that not everything in life had to be lonely or painful. One warm afternoon, the sun was shining bright, and the sky was a clear, endless blue. Ella was wiping down tables when she heard the familiar sound of boots on the wooden floor. She looked up and saw Luke, his hat tipped slightly back on his head, dust still clinging lightly to his boots. He carried a small bundle of hay, and a soft smile spread across his face as he met hers. "Hello, Ella," he said warmly. "Busy morning," Ella nodded, a little flustered. "You could say that," she replied, feeling a little lighter just hearing his voice. She handed him a glass of water, and he took it with a nod of thanks. There was a calm ease in his presence that made the hectic diner seem quieter, even if only for a moment. They started talking casually, first about small things, the weather, the town, and the local fair coming next week. Luke had a way of speaking that made ordinary things feel interesting. He would describe the way sunlight hit the fields back at his ranch, or how the wind whispered through the trees. Ella listened, captivated not just by the words, but by the way he spoke about life with a quiet appreciation. "You really like the quiet, don't you?" Luke asked after a pause, glancing at her. Ella hesitated before answering. "I do. It's peaceful, helps me think, helps me remember who I am when the world gets too noisy." Luke nodded as if he understood more than she was saying. "I get that," he said. "I grew up on a ranch. Quiet was part of life there too. You learn to notice things others don't." That moment, simple and ordinary as it seemed, marked the beginning of something new for Ella. She realized that she could talk to Luke without fear of judgment. She could share a thought, a feeling, or even a small dream, and he would listen without interruption or criticism. It was a rare gift, and she cherished it quietly. As days passed, their conversations grew deeper. Luke would sometimes stay after the diner closed, helping Ella clean or just sitting quietly, sharing stories about his life. He told her about the long days on the ranch, the animals he cared for, and the small joys that often went unnoticed by others. Ella shared little pieces of her life too, the quiet mornings she spent reading, the small walks she took around town, and the dreams she had once held before life had made her cautious. One late afternoon, Luke suggested something that surprised her. "Want to take a walk?" he asked. "There's a trail nearby, not far from here. It's peaceful and I think you might like it." Ella hesitated, unsure why she felt both nervous and excited. The thought of leaving the diner and stepping into the world with someone she barely knew brought a mix of fear and anticipation, but something about Luke's gentle presence made her nod. "Okay," she said softly. The walk was quiet at first, the kind of comfortable silence that did not feel awkward but reassuring. Luke led the way, his steps steady and calm. Ella followed, noticing the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns on the dirt path. Birds chirped in the distance, and the wind rustled the branches above them. It was a world away from the clatter and chatter of the diner, and Ella felt a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in a long time. As they walked, Luke began to talk about his past, not in a way that demanded sympathy but simply as part of his story. He spoke of challenges on the ranch, of hard work and determination, and of moments that had taught him patience. Ella listened, fascinated by the simplicity and honesty of his life. There was no pretense, no need to impress anyone, just the reality of living with care and integrity. At one point, they reached a small clearing where the sun painted the grass in golden light. Luke stopped and turned to her. "It's beautiful here, isn't it?" he said. Ella nodded, her eyes following the light dancing across the meadow. "It is," she said. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was a comfortable pause filled with unspoken understanding. She felt a quiet warmth in her chest, a sense that she was safe, seen, and accepted. As they continued walking, Ella found herself opening up in small ways. She spoke of her family, of the friends she had lost touch with, and of the moments that had shaped her life. Luke listened attentively, never interrupting, never judging. His presence alone gave her courage to share pieces of herself she had kept hidden for years. One afternoon, while they were sitting by a small stream, Ella confessed something she had rarely said aloud. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever feel truly happy again," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Luke looked at her with steady eyes. "Happiness isn't always about forgetting the past," he said softly. "It's about finding moments that make the hurt a little lighter step by step, and you don't have to do it alone." His words, simple yet profound, touched something deep inside her. Ella realized that she had been carrying her pain alone for too long. She had built walls to protect herself, but in doing so she had also shut out the possibility of trust and connection. Now, with Luke beside her, those walls began to feel less necessary. Over time, their bond grew stronger, built on small, meaningful gestures. Luke would help her close the diner, carry boxes to the storage room, or simply sit with her when the day had been long. Ella would bring him coffee, share her favorite books, or laugh at his quiet jokes. Each interaction, no matter how small, added another layer to the trust and affection growing between them. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, they sat on a small hill overlooking the town. The air was cool and the sky stretched endlessly above them. Ella felt a rare sense of peace, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. "I don't know why I feel this way," she admitted, her voice soft. "But being with you, it feels different, safe." Luke smiled, a gentle warmth in his eyes. "It should feel safe," he said. "You deserve that, Ella. You deserve someone who doesn't run away when things get hard." Her heart ached in a way that was both painful and relieving. She had spent so long guarding herself, but Luke's quiet consistency and patience made her want to take a chance, to believe that maybe trust wasn't as impossible as she had thought. As the days went by, Luke continued to be a steady presence in her life. He didn't push, didn't demand, and never forced her to share more than she was ready to. Instead, he offered support in the simplest, most meaningful ways. A kind word, a listening ear, a reassuring presence. And slowly, Ella began to realize that she was not alone in her struggle, that someone could care without expecting anything in return, and that healing could begin in the quiet moments of everyday life. One rainy afternoon, as the diner filled with the soft patter of rain against the windows, Ella found herself talking to Luke about her dreams once more. She spoke of small goals, like learning to paint again, or taking a short trip to the countryside. Luke listened intently, encouraging her gently. "Those are good dreams," he said, "and they're worth chasing, even if it's just one step at a time." Ella smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in years. There was no rush, no pressure, just the comforting knowledge that someone believed in her, cared for her, and would stay by her side. As part two of their story unfolded, Ella realized that her life was beginning to change, not because of grand gestures or dramatic events, but because of the quiet, steady presence of someone who chose to stay. Luke's patience, kindness, and understanding were slowly helping her to open her heart, to feel again, and to see the possibility of happiness in small, meaningful moments. And though there were still fears, doubts, and moments of pain lingering in the corners of her heart, Ella now had someone to walk beside her through them. She had someone who would not leave, who would not judge, and who would quietly remind her that trust and love were worth taking, even after heartbreak. It was a connection that could not be measured by grand declarations or dramatic turns of fate. It was a bond built on presence, patience, and small acts of care. And for Ella, it was exactly what she needed, a reminder that even in the midst of pain, there could be moments of light, hope, and healing, step by step, day by day. The days were growing warmer, and the town seemed to hum with a quiet energy that mirrored Ella's own cautious optimism. Life at the diner continued its usual rhythm, but there was something different in the air now. Ella felt it in small ways: the lingering warmth of Luke's smile, the ease of conversation, the quiet reassurance that she no longer had to carry her feelings entirely alone. Yet even as she began to trust him, a shadow from her past quietly stirred, reminding her that healing was not always simple or linear. One morning, as she wiped down the counters and prepared coffee, a familiar face appeared at the door. Her heart tightened instantly. It was someone from her past, someone who had caused her heartache and forced her to retreat into herself years ago. The memories came flooding back, moments of disappointment, betrayal, and hurt she had tried so hard to bury. Ella's hands trembled slightly as she poured a cup of coffee, unsure if she could face the emotions that had once seemed unbearable. Luke, sitting in his usual corner, noticed the change immediately. He didn't speak, didn't move, but his steady gaze held a silent question. "What is happening?" Ella shook her head slightly, forcing a smile, trying to hide the storm inside. But Luke wasn't one to ignore what he saw. After the brief encounter, she retreated to the back of the diner, breathing heavily. Her chest felt tight, and her mind was flooded with old fears. She had worked so hard to move forward, to build a life where she could feel safe again, and yet here it was, the reminder of pain she had hoped to leave behind. She felt small, vulnerable, and deeply afraid. Luke appeared beside her quietly, not rushing her, not pushing her to speak. He simply leaned against the doorway, his presence calm and reassuring. "You're not alone," he said softly. "Whatever it is, I'm here. You don't have to face it by yourself." Ella's eyes filled with tears, and she whispered almost inaudibly, "It hurts too much." The words were a confession she had never spoken aloud, a glimpse into the fear and sadness she had kept buried. Her voice shook, but she didn't try to hide it this time. She allowed herself to feel, to be seen, to be human. Luke stepped closer, careful not to crowd her, and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then I won't leave," he said simply. No grand gestures, no dramatic promises, just a quiet, unwavering commitment. His words anchored her, gave her permission to trust, and reminded her that pain could be shared without being magnified. Over the next few days, Ella found herself struggling with memories and emotions she had thought were long gone. She felt waves of sadness, fear, and uncertainty, moments where she wanted to retreat entirely back into herself. But Luke was patient. He didn't demand explanations, didn't insist she push through before she was ready. He simply showed up, pouring coffee for her, sitting beside her in silence, listening whenever she chose to speak. One afternoon, after a particularly emotional morning, Luke suggested they go for a walk outside the diner. "Fresh air might help," he said gently. Ella hesitated, afraid of being overwhelmed, but the thought of Luke's steady presence made her nod. They walked slowly, the dirt path winding through tall grass and wildflowers. The sunlight was warm on their skin, and the distant sound of birds created a sense of peace that contrasted with the storm inside Ella's heart. As they walked, she began to speak in fragments, small pieces of her story spilling out. She told him about the heartbreak that had shaped her, about the trust she had lost, and the fear that it might never return. Luke listened without interruption, his eyes never leaving hers. He didn't offer platitudes or quick fixes, he simply acknowledged her pain and offered quiet support. "You've carried this for a long time," he said finally. "It makes sense that it still hurts, but you don't have to carry it alone anymore. I'm here. I won't leave." Ella felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. It wasn't a magic solution, and it didn't erase the pain, but it was real. It was steady. It was trust in action. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope that healing might be possible, step by step. As the days turned into weeks, Luke continued to be a constant presence. He helped her find small ways to cope with her memories, suggesting simple routines like walking in the morning, sitting by the river to watch the sunlight, or writing down thoughts she wanted to release. These small acts, repeated consistently, helped Ella regain a sense of control over her emotions. She discovered that healing didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, built through trust, patience, and presence. One evening, as the sun set in a soft haze of pink and gold, Luke and Ella sat on the porch of the diner, sipping warm drinks and watching the town below. The air was cool and calm, carrying the scent of rain from earlier in the day. Ella felt a quiet strength in that moment, a sense that she could face her past with someone beside her. "I'm scared," she admitted softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever let go completely." Luke took her hand gently, his fingers warm and firm. "You don't have to let go completely," he said. "You just need to take one step at a time. I'll be with you for every step. You're not alone in this." Her chest ached, not with sorrow this time, but with a mix of relief and gratitude. She realized that she had been waiting for someone like Luke, not to erase her pain, but to share it, to help her carry it, and to remind her that she was not defined by the hurt she had endured. Over the next few days, Ella began to test the limits of her trust. She spoke more openly, laughed more freely, and allowed herself to feel joy in small moments. She discovered that pain could coexist with hope, that vulnerability could coexist with strength, and that love did not always demand perfection, only presence and patience. One particularly quiet afternoon, Ella shared a memory she had kept hidden for years, a memory that had haunted her dreams and fueled her fear of trusting again. As she spoke, Luke listened with unwavering attention, never flinching, never judging. When she finished, she looked at him, searching for any hint of disappointment or pity, but found only calm, understanding eyes. "You're incredibly brave," he said softly. "To share that, to face it, it's not easy, but it doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong. And I'm not going anywhere." Tears welled in Ella's eyes, but this time they were different. They weren't just tears of sorrow, they were tears of relief, recognition, and a budding sense of hope. She realized that the hurt she had feared would consume her no longer had that power. With Luke by her side, she could face it, acknowledge it, and still find moments of light. Their bond deepened in quiet, meaningful ways. Luke didn't need to say much. His steady presence, his willingness to listen, and his small gestures of care spoke volumes. Ella found herself leaning on him, not as a crutch, but as a trusted companion in a world that often felt uncertain. She began to see that vulnerability was not weakness. It was a bridge to connection, understanding, and healing. One evening, as they sat beneath the stars, Ella whispered again, almost to herself, "It hurts less now." Luke's hand found hers, warm and reassuring, and he replied, "Then I'll stay." In that moment, the past didn't disappear, and the pain didn't vanish completely. But something powerful had shifted. Ella felt a quiet sense of safety, a fragile yet growing trust, and a glimmer of hope that perhaps life could be gentle and kind again. Luke's presence had become a steady anchor, a reminder that even amidst pain, there could be moments of healing, laughter, and quiet joy. Ella realized that her story was no longer only about loss and fear. It was about resilience, trust, and the slow, deliberate unfolding of healing. Each day, each shared smile, and each quiet conversation built a foundation stronger than any fear from the past. And while she could not predict the future, she knew one thing with certainty. She was no longer alone, and someone who truly cared would not leave her side. Luke's patience, kindness, and unwavering presence had become more than comfort. They were a lifeline, a gentle reminder that love and trust could exist even after heartbreak. And as Ella looked up at the stars that night, she allowed herself to believe that, step by step, heart by heart, she could move forward, not in spite of her pain, but alongside it, with someone who chose to stay. Life in the small town had grown more comfortable for Ella. She had learned to smile without forcing it, to laugh without fear, and to feel warmth in moments she had once only known as fleeting. Luke had become a quiet constant in her life, a presence she could count on, and his patience and understanding had helped her face her past in ways she never thought possible. Yet life, as it always does, had a way of testing even the strongest bonds, and the calm they had found together was about to be challenged. It began with the news of trouble on Luke's ranch. A severe storm had damaged some of the fences, and several animals had gone missing. Luke needed to return home to help his family repair the damage and ensure the ranch was in order. He explained the situation to Ella, his voice calm but carrying a hint of concern. "I'll need to leave for a few days," he said softly. "Things at the ranch need attention." Ella felt a familiar unease settle in her chest. She wanted to tell him to stay, to put her feelings before everything else, but she also understood that his responsibilities were important. "I understand," she said quietly, forcing a smile. "Go, take care of things." "I'll be here." Luke nodded, appreciative of her understanding, but he sensed her worry. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he said, reaching out to squeeze her hand gently. "And when I return, things will be better, I promise." For the next few days, Ella struggled with the emptiness left by his absence. The diner felt quieter, the mornings slower, and she found herself missing the simple conversations and comforting presence she had come to rely on. Her mind wandered to fears she had thought she had left behind, the fear of being abandoned, the fear of being left to face her pain alone. She tried to focus on her work, keeping herself busy with cleaning, serving customers, and small routines that helped her feel grounded. But at night, when the diner was closed and the town was silent, the memories and fears crept back. She found herself standing by the window, staring at the empty road, wishing Luke would return, feeling the weight of both longing and uncertainty. Meanwhile, Luke was busy on the ranch, working long hours to repair fences, care for the animals, and support his family. Even in the midst of his own challenges, he thought of Ella often, wondering how she was coping in his absence. He sent small letters and messages, though he knew she might not read them immediately. He wanted her to feel his presence, even from afar, to remind her that she was not alone in facing life's difficulties. One evening, after a particularly long day on the ranch, Luke finally returned to town. Ella had stayed late at the diner, hoping to catch a glimpse of him as he rode into town. When she saw him approaching, dusty and tired but smiling warmly, a wave of relief and joy washed over her. She ran to him, throwing her arms around his shoulders. "I was worried," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know," Luke replied gently, holding her close. "But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Even as relief filled her heart, challenges continued to appear. The town was small and rumors spread quickly. People began to comment on Ella and Luke's growing closeness, some with curiosity, others with judgment. Ella, sensitive to the opinions of others because of past experiences, felt anxiety creeping in again. She worried that their bond might be affected by gossip, or that people would misunderstand their relationship. Luke noticed her unease and took her hand, guiding her away from the crowded streets. "Ignore them," he said firmly. "What we have is ours. No one else can define it, and no one else can take it away." Ella took a deep breath, trying to internalize his words. She knew he was right, yet old fears were stubborn and she struggled to fully release them. The past had taught her caution, and even as she wanted to embrace the present, she found herself hesitating. One afternoon, a problem arose that tested their bond in a more direct way. A customer at the diner became upset over an order, speaking harshly and blaming Ella for a mistake she had not made. Normally, she would have tried to apologize and fix the situation, but the stress triggered memories of past failures and criticism. She froze, unsure how to respond, and felt a wave of panic rising inside her. Luke, noticing the tension from across the diner, quickly stepped in. He calmly addressed the customer, resolving the situation without placing blame on Ella. Afterward, he walked over to her, his eyes warm with reassurance. "You handled that well," he said softly, "and even if it felt overwhelming, I saw how you stayed composed. You're stronger than you think." Ella felt a tear slip down her cheek. I don't know if I'm ready for this sometimes," she admitted. "It's hard to face things without fear." Luke gently held her hands. "You don't have to face it alone. That's the difference. You're not alone anymore, Ella. We face things together." It was moments like these that helped Ella understand the true meaning of partnership, of trust, and of love built on patience and presence rather than grand gestures. She realized that the challenges, both big and small, were opportunities to grow together, to strengthen the bond they had nurtured over weeks and months. As the week progressed, they faced more challenges. A sudden health scare with one of Luke's animals required immediate attention, forcing them to work long hours together on the ranch. Ella discovered that she could handle more than she had believed, and Luke's calm guidance helped her navigate situations she would have previously found overwhelming. They learned to communicate effectively, to support each other in practical ways, and to share the responsibilities that life demanded. Through these experiences, Ella began to confront her lingering fears head-on. She realized that her past pain did not have to dictate her present or future. With Luke beside her, she could face uncertainty with courage, knowing that she was supported, understood, and valued. Each challenge, rather than driving them apart, strengthened their connection and reinforced the trust they had built. One evening, after a long day on the ranch, they sat together under a canopy of stars. The sky stretched endlessly above them, filled with twinkling lights that seemed to reflect the small victories of the day. Ella leaned against Luke, feeling the warmth of his presence and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "I never thought I could handle so much," she said softly, "but with you here it feels possible." Luke smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That's because you're not alone anymore. Life can be hard, but it's easier when someone is walking beside you. And I'll keep walking beside you, every step of the way." The trust and reassurance in his words settled in her heart, quieting the anxieties that had lingered for so long. Ella realized that challenges would always arise, but the difference now was that she had someone she could rely on, someone whose presence was a constant source of strength and comfort. In the following days, life returned to a more gentle rhythm. The storm on the ranch was repaired, the animals were safe, and the town's whispers faded into the background. Ella and Luke continued to share simple moments of connection, walking together in the evening, laughing over shared meals, and enjoying quiet conversations that required no judgment, no pressure, only understanding. Through it all, Ella's confidence grew. She began to trust her own strength, realizing that she could face challenges not only because of Luke's support, but because of the resilience she had built over years of navigating her own struggles. She understood that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a bridge to connection, and that love, patience, and mutual support could transform pain into growth. One rainy afternoon, as the rain fell softly on the diner roof, Ella and Luke sat by the window, watching the drops ripple across the glass. Ella reached for Luke's hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying, for believing, for being here." Luke squeezed her hand gently. "Always, I told you I won't leave. No matter what comes, I'll be here." Ella smiled, feeling the weight of the past lighten just a little more. She realized that challenges, while inevitable, were no longer something she feared alone. With Luke beside her, she could face the uncertainties, fears, and obstacles life presented, confident in the strength of their bond. The week drew to a close, and life in the town settled into a calm, familiar rhythm. Ella looked out at the street from the diner window, her heart light and her mind clearer than it had been in years. She knew there would always be challenges, moments that tested her trust and courage, but she also knew that with Luke beside her, she could face them all. And as the sun set behind the distant hills, casting a warm golden glow over the town, Ella felt a quiet sense of peace. The world was not perfect, and life would continue to bring trials, but she had learned something invaluable, that love, patience, and steadfast support could transform even the most difficult moments into opportunities for growth, connection, and healing. She turned to Luke, who was standing quietly beside her, his presence a steady reassurance. "We can face anything," she said softly. Luke smiled, his eyes full of warmth. "Yes, we can, together." In that moment, amidst the golden light of evening, Ella understood the truth she had been learning step by step. That challenges were not just tests of endurance, but chances to strengthen bonds, to trust, and to grow stronger in the presence of someone who truly cared. And with Luke by her side, she knew that no matter what came next, she would never face it alone. The weeks had passed, and the town seemed to hum with the gentle rhythm of life. Ella had settled into a new sense of calm, a quiet confidence that had begun to grow from her experiences with Luke. She no longer woke each morning with the heavy weight of fear pressing on her chest. Instead, she felt a small, steady hope, a feeling that had been absent for far too long. Life had not become perfect, but it had become brighter, warmer, and filled with moments that reminded her of the simple joys she had once forgotten. Luke remained a constant in her life. He came to the diner each morning, his boots scuffing lightly against the wooden floor, his hat slightly worn from the travels he still sometimes needed to make. He never rushed her, never demanded anything, and yet his presence had become an anchor. With him, she felt safe to be herself, free to express her feelings without fear, and supported enough to face life's uncertainties. One quiet afternoon, the diner was nearly empty, with only a few regulars enjoying their coffee. Ella wiped down the counter, and Luke sat in his usual corner, sipping his black coffee and watching her with a gentle smile. The sunlight poured in through the windows, casting a warm glow on the worn tables and the familiar photographs lining the walls. There was a peace in this ordinary scene that felt extraordinary to Ella, a quiet reminder of how far she had come. "I never thought I'd feel like this again," she said softly, more to herself than to Luke. Luke looked up, meeting her gaze. "Like what?" he asked, his voice calm and patient. "Peaceful, happy, safe," she said, her eyes glistening. "I used to think those feelings were gone for me, that life would always be hard, lonely, and full of pain." Luke stood and walked over to her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You've earned this peace, Ella. You've faced so much, and you've grown stronger because of it. I've seen it, and I'm proud of you." Ella felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was more than just pride or comfort. It was validation, recognition, and acceptance all wrapped together. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to fully acknowledge her own resilience. She realized that healing wasn't a destination but a journey, and she had traveled farther than she had ever imagined. That evening, Luke suggested they take a walk outside, under the vast, open sky. Ella agreed, feeling a mixture of excitement and calm. They walked slowly, side by side, letting the quiet of the evening and the gentle breeze fill the spaces between their words. The town around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of their footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. As they reached a small hill overlooking the countryside, Luke stopped and gestured for Ella to sit beside him. They watched as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink, orange, and gold. Ella felt a sense of awe, a quiet wonder at the beauty that surrounded her. It was a moment of serenity, one that reminded her of the simple joys life could offer when fear and pain were held at bay, if only for a little while. "I feel like I can finally breathe," she whispered, resting her head lightly on Luke's shoulder. Luke wrapped an arm around her, holding her gently. "That's because you've allowed yourself to. You've trusted, you've faced your fears, and you've opened your heart again. That's not easy, Ella, but you've done it." Her heart ached, but it was a good kind of ache, the ache of gratitude, love, and relief. She had learned to trust slowly, carefully, and with intention, and in doing so, she had discovered something she thought she had lost forever: the ability to hope, to feel joy, and to love again. Over the following days, Ella and Luke continued to strengthen their bond through small, meaningful moments. They worked together at the diner, shared quiet walks, and spent evenings under the stars. Each interaction, no matter how ordinary, became a thread in the tapestry of their growing connection. Ella realized that happiness was not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but about the simple act of being present for someone, of sharing life's ordinary moments with care and attention. One afternoon, while walking near a stream that meandered through the outskirts of town, Ella stopped and picked up a small stone, smoothing it between her fingers. "I used to collect things like this," she said softly. Little reminders that life had beauty even when it was hard. Luke smiled, kneeling beside her. "It's still beautiful, Ella, and it always will be, especially when we notice it together." They sat together on the grass, listening to the water flow, feeling the sun warm their faces. There was a quiet intimacy in these shared silences, a connection that went beyond words. Ella realized that trust and love were not always loud or dramatic. They were gentle, steady, and deeply sustaining. As the days turned into weeks, Ella began to embrace her future with a newfound courage. She pursued small dreams she had once shelved, like painting again and taking walks to explore the countryside. Luke supported her in every step, offering encouragement without pressure, presence without intrusion, and love without expectation. In return, she learned to trust herself, her instincts, and the world around her more fully. One evening, as the sky filled with stars and the town settled into quiet slumber, Ella whispered something she had wanted to say for a long time. "It hurts less now," she murmured, her voice soft but steady. Luke looked at her, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "Then I'll stay," he replied, his voice calm, certain, and full of warmth. In that simple exchange, all that had transpired between them, the hardships, the fears, the trust, and the growing love, was reflected. The past no longer held the power to control her. The pain still existed, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it had become a part of her story, a story that now included healing, hope, and the steady presence of someone who chose to stay. Their bond deepened in ways that words could not fully capture. Ella discovered that life's uncertainties could be faced with courage when shared with someone who truly cared. She learned that vulnerability was not weakness but a bridge to connection, and that love, patience, and mutual support could transform even the most difficult moments into opportunities for growth and joy. As autumn approached, the town seemed to glow with a warm, golden light. Ella and Luke spent their days walking through fields of tall grass, watching the colors change, and enjoying quiet afternoons at the diner. Each day brought small victories, moments of laughter, and quiet affirmations of trust and love. One afternoon, while sitting on the porch of the diner, Ella looked out at the town, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She had come a long way, from a place of fear, pain, and hesitation to a place of hope, confidence, and love. And through it all, Luke had remained steady, patient, and unwavering, proving that trust and connection could flourish when nurtured with care. "I never thought life could feel this good again," she said softly, her fingers intertwined with his. Luke smiled, his eyes reflecting the warm glow of the afternoon sun. "It's been waiting for you, Ella. You just needed someone to walk beside you, not to carry you, but to share the journey, and I'm honored to be that person." As the days continued, Ella realized that the story she was living was not about perfection or the absence of challenges. It was about resilience, trust, and the courage to embrace love despite the risks. Life would continue to bring trials, moments of doubt, and the occasional storm, but now she knew she had the strength, support, and love to face whatever came her way. One quiet evening, as the stars appeared above the town and the wind whispered through the trees, Ella and Luke sat together, watching the world around them. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and felt a profound sense of peace. "I used to think happiness was impossible for me," she said softly. "But now I see that it's here and it's real. Thank you for staying." Luke kissed the top of her head gently. "Always. I told you I won't leave. No matter what comes, I'll be here. That's my promise." Ella smiled, tears of joy and relief glistening in her eyes. She realized that she had finally learned to trust, to hope, and to love again. The pain of the past no longer controlled her. Instead, it had shaped her into someone stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace life fully. As they sat together, the town quiet around them, Ella felt a sense of certainty she had not known in years. Life was unpredictable, and challenges would come, but with Luke by her side, she knew that she could face anything. And in that moment, she understood the deepest truth she had learned on this journey: that love, patience, and steadfast presence could transform pain into healing, fear into courage, and ordinary moments into extraordinary ones. The stars twinkled above, the night air was calm, and the world seemed full of possibility. Ella looked at Luke, her heart full, and whispered softly, "I'm ready for whatever comes next." Luke smiled, holding her hand tightly. "Then we face it together," he said, his voice strong and steady. "Always together." And for the first time in years, Ella truly believed it.